In this section, we'll be taking a look at the Configuring and Monitoring Class of Service objective of the JNCIP-SP exam, where we'll cover some of the basic configuration elements of Class of Service. For more detailed coverage of this topic, please check out the Juniper courses AJSPR, JL2V, and JL3V. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the configuration building blocks for applying Class of Service on Juniper devices. So typically, the first thing that you're going to do as traffic enters your network relating to Class of Service is to classify that traffic. And because we can't trust the markings on that packet, because the packets have traversed a third-party network, we'll typically use a multi-field classifier to perform this classification action. And as discussed in previous videos, multi-field classification is achieved just using a firewall filter applied on interfaces. And we have an example multi-field classifying firewall filter applied on this interface. So let's take a look at it. So we're just using the standard firewall filter match conditions. In this example here, we're matching on destination IP address. The key bit that's different is that in the then actions, as well as accepting the packet, we are assigning a forwarding class, and optionally, we are also assigning packet loss priority. So you see here, for web traffic, we're assigning a forwarding class of web and a loss priority of low. For voice traffic, we're assigning a loss priority of low, forwarding class of voice. And then all other traffic, we are assigning a forwarding class of best effort and a packet loss priority of high. So this is how we use multi-field classifiers. This is our traffic now classified. So we now need to provide differentiated servicing in the device. The first thing that you would do is that you would define your forwarding classes. So this is what we've done here. We've bound queue numbers to forwarding classes. So we have forwarding classes defined. The next thing that we do is that we need to map these forwarding classes to schedulers. And we do that with scheduler maps. We have an example scheduler map configured here. We are specifying the forwarding classes, and we're binding those forwarding classes to schedulers. We then need to configure these schedulers that have been bound to the forwarding classes, which is what we have listed here. And in the scheduler configuration is where you're actually providing the differential handling of those different traffic types that we have classified into different forwarding classes. In schedulers, some of the example configuration, you would be specifying a transmit rate. So this can be an absolute value, a percentage of the interface throughput, or we can use remainder. And remainder will be the bandwidth that has not been allocated to other forwarding classes via other schedulers. So as well as the transmit rate, you can define the amount of interface buffer to be allocated to a forwarding class, and you can define the priority of the forwarding class. Remember that Junipers use a form of weighted round-robin scheduling to implement Class of Service. This means that in-profile high traffic is going to be serviced above in-profile medium-high traffic is going to be serviced above in-profile low traffic. By in-profile, I mean all of the traffic for a given forwarding class that is operating below the configured transmit rate. So these are the key items of scheduler configuration. We have our transmit rate, our buffer size, and our forwarding class or queue priority. We can also associate forwarding classes with drop profile maps. And drop profile maps bind drop profiles to a given forwarding class. And this is what we use to implement RED, or weighted random early detection. You specify drop profile maps, the packet loss priority that you are mapping to these profile maps, the protocols that you're mapping, here we're mapping any protocol, and then the drop profiles. Let's have a look at an example drop profile. So with drop profiles, you associate interface fill level with a drop probability. And we're saying when the interface fills to this fill level, the traffic has this probability of being dropped. And you can associate just one fill level and drop probability, or, as is the case here, multiple levels. So we now have our forwarding classes defined, associated to schedulers via a scheduler map, and we have some drop profiles associated with our forwarding classes. The final thing that we need to do to actually apply this class of service configuration to the device, to subject traffic to this differentiated servicing, is to apply the scheduler map that we've defined to the interfaces on which we want to expose this traffic to this class of service configuration. An example of this is here. Remember that this was our scheduler map configuration from earlier, and we have applied this scheduler map to the interface. So this is all you need now to subject traffic to differentiated servicing on this device. There are a few more final configuration elements that we should talk about though. We've performed multi-field classification on this device. To assist downstream devices to make their classification job easier, we can perform rewrite on this device. We can assign marking in those packets that we pass downstream to allow downstream devices to use behavior aggregate classifiers. And we have this configured on this device as well. In rewrite rules, we're mapping the forwarding classes and packet loss priority to the marking that we want to impose on packets that are in these forwarding classes when we pass the traffic downstream. So you would configure a rewrite rule like this, as I say, mapping forwarding class to the desired markings. When you're specifying code points for DSCP, you can either use aliases, as is the case here, or you could be using the raw binary values if you so wished. And then on downstream devices, you would configure a behavior aggregate classifier that performs exactly the same kind of mapping, only in reverse. Instead of mapping forwarding class and packet loss priority to marking, we're mapping marking to forwarding class and packet loss priority. We have an example behavior aggregate classifier on this device as well. There you can see they look very, very similar, rewrite rules and classifiers, because they're performing the same task just in the opposite direction. And as with a scheduler map, we need to apply classifiers and rewrite rules to interfaces. You do that like this. This is an overview of some of the key configuration elements for class of service on Juniper devices.